dia, buenos dias, bonjour, ni hao, etc., etc. We're so happy to have you all here. I want to welcome you on behalf of the American Association of Teachers of Spanish and Portuguese. I'm the Executive Director. Call me Sherry. Sherry's been long. Our office is located in Birmingham, and a lot of people don't realize that. So if you are a Spanish teacher, yay. But if you're not, we're even happier to have you here today to be with us. I want to introduce you to the people that are hosting and sponsoring today so that you can get to know them briefly, and then we'll proceed right into our great day we have planned for you. So that you can get oriented, you should have picked up several folders. The blue folder has in it the agenda for the day. So you can follow along. We'll be in this room for all day long excepting for lunch, so that you're oriented. I already had pointed out to you that the restrooms are here. When you go to the restroom, just get up and go. You don't have to get a pass or a hallway pass sign or anything here. We're all grown up today. And I just want to thank teachers for driving from the four corners of Alabama to learn about the Seal of Biliteracy. This is going to be a special day. We have special people here for you that you'll learn about. They flew in just to spend the day with you. So please get to know our speakers so that you can use them as inspiration and resources as you move forward thinking about what are we going to do with this Seal of Biliteracy thing. If you know nothing about it, that we're even happier that you're here today. Now, let me tell you about your hosts. Your hosts are Dr. Lamia Ben Yosef, and you can call her Lamia. She is the department chair of the Department of Modern Foreign Languages here at Birmingham Southern, and she has a terrific language department here that you will learn a little bit about today as well. So, Lamia, can I call out the names of your faculty members? So, what I'd like to do just to orient you to the language faculty at Birmingham Southern is I'm going to ask you to stand so that today, when you can't find something, you will recognize somebody from Birmingham Southern and you'll know who to ask the question to find the ladies' room when you go to the humanities building, right? So as that goes, I will start with Dr. Lamia Ben Yosef, who I already introduced. Would Dr. Barbara Domchekova please stand? She is a Spanish professor, yay. Dr. Jessica Ramos.
Good morning. Good morning. Welcome.
So, please greet her today and ask them questions about Birmingham Southern. The third person who teaches Spanish, but not all the time. She's also in administration. The Master of Logistics, Kim Lewis, over here. And then we also have Latin here at Birmingham Southern. Dr. Mary Gilbert, where are you? You will see her today. She's a classicist, and I have sat through her Latin class, and it's really quite wonderful. And last but not least, we have Yan Tong. Yan, please stand. And Chinese, she teaches Chinese here at Birmingham Southern. So these are your hosts today. If you have questions about the language program or anything else, please pull them aside. They're anxious to get to know you. And with that said, are there other announcements that we need to make, Ms. Kim or Lamia?
Yeah, you had mentioned that the resources will be available for everyone who are asking about it.
Yes, okay. So if you are wondering, do I have to take a whole lot of notes today? What we're going to be doing on Monday morning is Ben, who you met at the registration desk, and Sherry will be sending you out a link to a Google folder where we will drop in as many presentations that are shared with us, other materials, brochures about the Seal of Biliteracy, the agenda, contact information, etc. So you will receive that on Monday morning so that you can sort of sit back, relax, and enjoy today and not be worried about trying to take a whole lot of notes. And so we'll have our contact information for you there as well. Thank you for reminding me of that. I think we're good to go. I think what we'll do now is we'll go right into our first speaker. And I want to introduce her to you. She's really quite spectacular. Her name is Linda Egnatz. And Linda Egnatz sounds really fancy if I call out all the cool things she's done on her bio. But she's just a regular old teacher, and a regular old high school teacher, but she's really well known for her role as a national cheerleader for the Seal of Biliteracy. So she's been involved with the movement, if you want to call it that, for a while. And you'll learn today, if you don't know already, that it recognizes learners for proficiency in at least two languages, right? So she's won a lot of really amazing awards. She was a Golden Apple Teacher in 2013. She was the ACTFL National Teacher of the Year in 2014. And she sits on a number of boards, and if that weren't enough, she left the classroom in 2018 and became the director of the Global Seal of Biliteracy. So she will be telling a lot about her background, but I want to give you a couple of other little morsels. She now flies around an awful lot talking to crowds like this about the Seal of Biliteracy and the Global Seal. She will also hopefully differentiate for you the difference between the State Seal and the Global Seal, because there's always a lot of confusion there. So we're going to let her talk passionately to you this morning about the SEAL movement, what you need to know to kind of get on the bus and move along with it. And she is a nationally board certified teacher, and she has taught at multiple levels. So I wanted to share that because I know we have multiple levels of teachers in the room. She's taught in junior high school, and at the college levels, and is very familiar with AP as well. Some of you may be AP teachers. So she's deeply involved in the profession. I could go on and on about all the different things she's done, but I think what I'll do is leave it there and not take away any time for this presentation, and then hopefully we'll get a chance to do questions and answers as well. But let me urge you, she will be with us all day long. Please pull her aside and continue to ask her questions, because she knows things that other people don't know. Like I talked to somebody from the virtual school, and how does the seal work if you teach in a virtual school? She's the one to ask. So with no further ado, please applaud Linda Egnatz, because she flew out there.
Well, thank you, Sherry, and certainly thank you to our hosts here. They just welcomed us with open arms and provided us with everything that we need, and I'm sure they'll be doing that for you all day today. And mostly, I just really want to welcome all of you. Just a quick show of hands. I know there are some middle school teachers. Where are you? Awesome. This is the pathway. We really want to begin as early as possible. Do we have any high school? Yes, lots of high school and universities. I know we have our university staff, some others, yeah, absolutely. And then there may be some others I haven't called out, but there is a pathway for each and every one of you with a Seal of Biliteracy. So my contact information is here. It will also be on the last slide. And as Sherry said, I'm graciously here all day and excited to talk to you because this is my passion. This is what I care about. So I'm going to talk just in this first introductory presentation a little bit about the sort of Seal of Biliteracy in general, or SEALs. And then we're also going to just kind of talk about where are the challenges that other schools that have taken this pathway have encountered, and what do we know in terms of how to make those challenges turn into successes. And so those are the three pieces we're going to really kind of focus on. First of all, just the Seals of Biliteracy and what they mean to your students, but also to your language programs. Then we're going to talk again the challenges and successes. And then finally, just talk about pathways and articulation. What comes next? And so those are really the sort of pieces. And just to begin with, a Seal of Biliteracy, sort of by general definition, is a reward or recognition that is certifying language skills for two or more languages. Typically, when we say biliteracy, that does not mean just bilingual. It also means that there are reading and writing or literacy skills that are also part of that component. Now, you're going to find out that states are different and languages are different. So, for example, some of our indigenous languages may not have a written form. And so there are accommodations for those kinds of languages, but in general, we're measuring all 4 language skills. In 2014, I had the opportunity to write an op-ed in Education Week about how I believe the Seal of Biliteracy was a game changer. And that's because I had seen that happen in my own classroom. I saw students who didn't care about doing more, do as much as they could to achieve something that was not a grade, that was not something that went on their transcript, but rather this recognition. And it was the carrot they wanted. And I saw my students sign up for the next level of coursework, and it was an incredible change. And that's what we're going to talk about. So I believe that in 2014, now 2022, it's even more true. And so that's really what I kind of want to share with you, because it is, in fact, a game changer to your language programs. And it gives students two things. It gives them, first, a reason to continue the language and level up, to improve. They're not in the language course to meet a criteria for maybe a college application or to just get a good grade or improve their GPA. They're actually in your language course to acquire a language that they can use. And then secondly, it's an opportunity for them to leverage. In other words, what do they do with their language skills? How do they highlight those? And so that's really what we want. So my sort of mission possible here is really the proficiency. Because a lot of times we don't think that's achievable. You know, we have students that, we don't see progress. Well, this is one way to impact that. And so when you start to recognize proficiency and really be very practical, but also very intentional about knowing where your student is in that pathway to higher levels of proficiency, and then what it is that it takes to get them to the next level, that excites students. It'll also excite you as you see that progress being made. And when you tell someone they're good at something, they keep doing it. You know, I quit knitting because I was not good at it, and people made that very clear to me. But if you get you get a good grade, you take the next class. If you get a recognition, then you know that I'm good at it for life. And so we talked about this sort of hashtag with the Seal of Biliteracy, to by lit to quit. And that's what we want. We want students to continue that pathway. And so for me, it has been an exciting pathway. I see my own students, Mr. Ahmad, with 3 languages, and I chose him as a sort of poster child for multilingualism to present my golden apple when I had that opportunity. Students that I had seen and traveled with, for example, in a spring break program, come together with their Seals of Biliteracy. These are students from my state of Illinois. College and university students looking for a way to mark that language credential is something they can use in the workplace. And even students who are learning their language outside of traditional classrooms as a heritage language learner at a Saturday program are excited about an opportunity to recognize their identity and their family story. And so when we look at those pieces, the Seal of Biliteracy does recognize language skills and accomplishments, but it does so much more. And it's the more that are the benefits that you're going to want to focus on as you begin to approach administration, parents, and other stakeholders to adopt the program. And so let's just kind of think about the language we use. An award is wonderful, and that's typically the way the Seal of Biliteracy is described. As an award, it's a prize or a mark of recognition that's given in honor of an achievement. And it does all of that. But it is more. It is really a credential. It is really a certification of skills. A credential is defined as an official document that details a skill, a qualification, or a competence. It's issued by a third party. The Seal of Biliteracy does that. It fits that. And it's measured by a test. And we're using external testing, so it's not a test that the teacher creates that's different from a test that another teacher might create in another district. And a credential is proof of one's skills, abilities, or experience that relate to the job fields, things they can actually do. That is also a definition of a Seal of Biliteracy. And when you begin to talk about credentials and certifications for your students, parents and stakeholders, administrators, counselors begin to listen, because now it has value outside of a clap, here's a nice to have, where are you going to put that certificate in a folder that your mom keeps in, with all of your 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, whatever. So we want to raise the value of what you're asking students to work toward. And there are a lot of benefits. Kristen Davin, who you're going to hear from later today, I had the privilege of working with her on a study And one of the things that came out of that was a student testimonial. A number of student interviews and focus groups were a part of that program. And one of the students says, it gives you a motive to finish. Before I was like, well, why am I in this class? And we see that with students. Oftentimes their rationale for your class is not about language at all. I mean, I had students, they would get excited. I remember my second year program that they had passed the class or passed the test with a D because at least they get the credit on their transcript. We don't want that. We want them to be looking at what have I acquired of language. And so that's an important piece. So here are just some of the things that certification credentials, a seal of biliteracy can do for students. First of all, when you provide awards, that increases motivation. We know that all of the motivational research tells us that. Secondly, students want to have recognition potentially for college applications. They want to stand out. They want to be different. Depending upon the programs you use and when the award is given, that can be used for early admission or other college admission scholarship letters. Advanced placement. When a student comes with a defined test score that lets the university know what their level of proficiency is, that makes placement easier, whether it's retroactive credit or advanced placement or some other program that the university will offer. Some universities will offer college credit for a Global Seal or a State Seal of Biliteracy. Students that are in upper levels or students that are seniors that are looking for interesting programs maybe to do in the summer, whether it's an internship or working with an NGO or study abroad, when they can distinguish themselves as having language skills, that helps. And obviously in the workplace. And that's where we're going to kind of transition because that's where students see the value. And so this is again from that particular study where we see that when a Seal of Biliteracy program is adopted, there is a growth in the program. Because to get it, it is a longer pathway. It requires a longer sequence. Depending upon the state, Alabama is going to be an intermediate mid. That's going to take them more than 2 years in most cases to get to that level in all 4 of their language skills. And that's certainly true if they're in a character-based language. But what we saw is that within a couple of years, the students say, well, I want to get that. And they begin to plan their schedule around earning a Seal of Biliteracy, and you will see programs, the retention go up, and you'll see the programs increase. And in this case, we see that with the exception of Latin, in which case this school was actually phasing Latin out, the other AP programs doubled in 2 years. So this is, could be the challenge of having to hire another language educator. That could be, a really great result or outcome of adopting a Seal program. Students see the motivation, not about school. In fact, for most high school students, they don't even connect a Seal of Biliteracy with university or college experiences. They see it connected to life. And so when we looked at these focus groups from the study, we saw that when students were asked about what did they think the value of a Seal of Biliteracy, you'll notice the top 2 are about employment and career use. Students intrinsically see the value. Oh, if I'm bilingual, will that help me in the job force, or in getting a job? And they see that immediately, and we've sometimes skipped that. We talk about college or placement or college. They're looking way beyond. They're looking at what's in it for their future. And so are parents. And so this is really important piece for us to understand about motivation and what it is that it's going to take for you to kind of share this idea with your administrators and other stakeholders. And bottom line, we know that the Seal of Biliteracy excites learners. And there are many seals of biliteracy when we think about it because we now have 49 states that have a Seal of Biliteracy type program. And I call it a kind of program because it's not always called a Seal of Biliteracy. Some states use the term Seal of Biliteracy. Other states call it an endorsement. And still others call it a certification. And so, for example, in Illinois, we have the Illinois State Seal of Biliteracy. My neighbor, Indiana, they call theirs the Certificate of Multilingual Competency. And so, they just made it sound better than ours. But I do like that they're setting them up for multilingualism. Let's not stop with our second language. And so as we see the State Seal of Biliteracy, that's an powerful piece. And it's important because it's the first time we see American, U.S. governmental, state entities endorsing language learning, saying that being bilingual is an asset and something valuable, and we do not want to let that go. That's incredibly important from an advocacy point of view, that they're aware of what your students are achieving in your classrooms. And so we want to participate in the state seal program if your school can. Some states don't allow, for example, a private school or some other situation. But we do want to participate if we can, because that's sending a message to our governmental officials that language is important and that it's not, something we don't care about. Secondly, there is a Global Seal of Biliteracy, which was really born from some of the gaps that are in the state programs, or as a way to serve our university students who want to document language, or even our heritage learners who may acquire language skills and who want to be recognized and rewarded along that pathway before they get to their senior year and that state seal opportunity. And so a number of universities will use the Global Seal, but a number of high schools will use both their state and Global Seal as well. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in pathways. And so if we think about the big picture, what our students see, in higher ed, we've seen a loss of language programs and a loss of students enrolled in language programs. At the same time, the job market demand for bilinguals and multilinguals is like doubling and tripling. So there's a disconnect, and you can be a part of that solution. Your students saw it in the terms of what we see from the surveys and the reports. And so we want to be able to have this conversation, which is great. Here we are in a university campus, to talk about how can you, as high school teachers, fill those upper level classrooms here at a university. Because though you are going to graduate students that won't need those first year or two, they're going to be able to go into a third year university kind of program with the skills that you are providing to them. And then you're documenting it and making that important. And the documentation is increasingly important. It's something that we see ongoing in the field of education, that credentials and certifications and badging, those kinds of things are really important. We see those as trends, because employers want to know not what course a student took, but what they're actually able to do in the workplace. And so these are all things that the Seal of Biliteracy is perfectly timed. And you can share, and again, you'll have these access to these slides, the research notations and so on, to share with administrators to talk about how your high school or your K-12 program can provide those opportunities for students. Students want their learning to be visible, something they can easily show and highlight. And when, for example, they're applying for a job, the HR person might want to know, well, what was your major or your minor? They don't really look at all the courses a student took. They don't look to see what maybe grade they got. They look at an overall GPA or an SAT or an ACT score. This provides your students another way to say, and I have, as an individual document, a Seal of Biliteracy. And that's going to be really important. And so we think about that concept of credentials that students can share. How do they leverage what it is you're providing to them? Well, first of all, a Seal of Biliteracy can be shareable. They can certainly add it to their resume or their awards listing on the Common App, for example. They can share it digitally if it's a global seal. It goes right in onto LinkedIn. We'll see that. And we want things that are stackable. If you think about a pathway, maybe they continue on and they get to a higher level of language certification. But most importantly, students need evidence. They need evidence of what they can do. And a grade A, B, it doesn't provide that. And it doesn't measure it doesn't certainly articulate or describe what a student can do. But students know that language skill is important. So, for example, if we look here at what the American Nursing Association says, their average, this is on ZipRecruiter, the average nurse, $70,000 a year across the country. That's pretty a really nice salary. But if that nurse is bilingual, according to the American Nursing Association, there's a 7% pay differential on an average, and in some cities it's as high as 14%. In this case, $85,000. So students can do that, especially in the medical field and other spaces. So students want a credential. They're going to be excited that we offer it. And so let's kind of come back down to some of the functionality of Seals of Biliteracy. So the first piece is, here's the kind of the overview of the seal, of the state seal of biliteracy program. You'll notice that all 49, except for one, South Dakota, have a program. Again, it may not be called the Seal of Biliteracy, but it is a program that recognizes language learning. We, on the globalseal.com, we can sort of keep and updated state resources if you're interested. There's an interactive map, and you can find out more about each state and what their criteria is, because it will differ from state to state. Just like these state seals of biliteracy logos differ, the programs differ. So, for example, we talked earlier about they have a name change in some cases. They're generally awarded to seniors, but there are some states that award it earlier. And that's actually a value to juniors, for example, that are trying early admission. That might be an example of that. And we also see that it's typically for public school programs, but there are also states that include or have a pathway for private or independent schools. States differ in terms of how they collect the data, how you apply. There are some states, Nebraska, for example, where the student has to apply individually for themselves. We also see a district where there might be recorded and reporting that has to be done. Other states don't collect any data. So each state is very, very unique. And what's available in terms of the recognition may also be unique. In some cases, the state provides a seal, or in my case, they provide artwork, digital artwork you can go and create something with. Then also, finally, the last one is that each state will determine its own rules, its proficiency level. It's not the same in every state, as well as what's the required evidence. In other words, it might be a test score, it could be a portfolio in some cases. And so if we look at just kind of where the states fit, we see that there's a difference between where the states are in terms of their level required. Your state, Alabama, is going to come in where the majority of states do, at intermediate and mid. And we also see that a number of states are due reporting. In fact, we look at the last 2020 State Seal of Biliteracy report, and we add up all of the students, and we talk, there's 100,000 students at intermediate, mid, or above across the U.S. that year that were documented. That's an amazing piece of information for our universities with declining enrollments to have. And so let's kind of transition. So we know we want it. We know our students want it. We know it can impact our programs. We know a little bit about the state programs. And we'll be hearing more about your program today. So what are the challenges and the solutions? Well, the first challenge is that you have to inform the stakeholders. If you have a program and no one knows about it, it's not very successful. So that's the first and most important thing. Parents are really excited about this because they want everything that their student can get to distinguish themselves above everyone else. So I remember in our particular school district, after we had implemented the Seal of Biliteracy for a couple of years, we had freshman parents coming in with 8th grade open houses saying, I want my son or daughter to get the Seal of Biliteracy. And when we did that, in our particular district, there were no electives for freshmen. None. Not even a language opportunity. And so if they wanted to take a language as a freshman, they would have to defer a course, maybe a social studies or science course to another year, or they had to take summer school. But because they wanted Seals of Biliteracy, parents were willing to do that. They wanted it. School counselors, they need to know the benefits. They need to know about what students will get. So they're willing to help students fit language into their schedule, especially when the schedules are tight with other requirements. And certainly your administrators, because did you know that, for example, AP is one of the tests that is a part of, usually one of the accepted tests for a Seal of Biliteracy. The AP test is a part of the, what's called the school reports. How many of you are familiar with the school reports? I see a lot of hands. How many students take AP as a part of that? That affects things like taxes and desirability, your school report card for your school. So by adding a Seal of Biliteracy program, you can actually raise your school's report card when those AP numbers begin to double. I mean, there's lots of benefits you have to sell. So we think about what are those benefits? How do you articulate them? Well, the first thing is it should be on your school's website. In Illinois, that's actually part of our state law. But there's other places where we can include that. For example, did you know, I heard the state is very big into sports. Is that like, so If you're interested in the NCAA Division I eligibility, do you know that 4 years of language is one of those pieces? Well, if you've got kids that are interested in sports, I would be sharing that with your counselors and with your students and with your coaches. But also, you can include things on your website. For example, here's the Illinois State Seal of Biliteracy on one of our Illinois school websites. For the Global Seal, we provide a badge so that you can say we credential with, so it's visible. If people don't know about it, they're not going to participate. And the University of Alabama actually has a video, so that's another way that you can share the news and let people know about it. The other kinds of things you can do to let people know about it are other ways to make your program visible through publicity. So, for example, I love this one that came out in Maryland just last week. Seal of Biliteracy is a new measure for success at graduation. Thinking about it in those terms. So when your students, make it a big deal, put it in the newspaper, get it out on Twitter and in the media, because other people are like, well, how do I get that? Why did my student not get that? And so it becomes that competition. Even from one district to another, we've seen districts adopt a Seal of Biliteracy because their neighboring district had it. And they get very, the administrators get real competitive. And so again, coming back to that research, the biggest problem was that students don't just need to know about the opportunity the final year when maybe they're testing for the seal. They need to know ahead of time because they might need that longer sequence of language learning. And unfortunately, the research we did in Illinois, after several years already in having programs, is that sophomores and seniors, even those in language programs, were not necessarily aware of the opportunity. So we have to make it visible in lots of different ways. And so the other piece that we want to think about is you want to focus on what is it going to take to get students there. That's another challenge. It's great if you have a program, but if no one is reaching the goal, the program's in trouble. And so here in Alabama, that's going to be an intermediate mid based on the ACTFL scale. And what you see here, really that novice, intermediate, and advanced are the levels at some point in there where we see students in K-12 programs actually reaching in terms of proficiency. And so if we look at different ways, so how do you inform yourself? This is like a day or a week's training right here. So to give you just a couple of resources, on the ACTFL.org publications website, you'll see proficiency guidelines. Those are listed actually by language, and you can look at what do samples at intermediate mid look like in those languages. And you can do it in English even for your students, and they'll be like, oh. It's a visual or aha for them to know what does it look like that I'm imitating? What is it that I have to be able to do? Another opportunity that you have to learn and actually score for yourself to see if you're actually aware of when you begin to grade of where those levels are, is the Avant Assessment Advanced Program. So there's lots of tools out there, but you want to school yourself on what these proficiency levels look like so you know how to get your students there. Another piece that can be really helpful and informative is if you can take your curriculum and have that articulation discussion with other members of your department. This will be a challenging situation, just letting you know. And then align that curriculum and summative assessments, final exams, for example, with proficiency guidelines. So that was one of the big pieces we did in our school district. And it was not a one-year process. It was about a 3-year process. And what we actually ended up with was something that worked very well, which was that if a student was on target to getting to the proficiency level, we took our intermediate, we're in intermediate high state, so we started there and backed it up like a backward design to what they needed to be at the end of semester, year 1, semester 1, year 1, semester 2. And we backed it up. And then if the student was on target, they would get a B. Now you have students that want A's. So what do you have to do to get an A? They had to be above the level. And it worked like magic because students who would otherwise, you have those students who, even the A students, that what do I have to do to get an A? And that's exactly what they do and no more. But by setting the bar, it's sort of like, comprehensible input plus 1, right? Here's what we have, but we're going to give them that little extra they have to stretch and reach for. And we did it. It worked very successfully. And we saw our state seal numbers double almost every year. It was amazing. So we think about what does that look like. If you have alignment, you can create create target goals for each level of your courses. If you have the luxury of a middle school program or a dual language or something even lower, that sort of splits those up and makes it even easier for students to achieve. Your summative assessment should be appropriate for the level, but include reach and risk. Oftentimes we assess where this, once we learn about this, we say, well, they can't do that yet because they're at this level. But if you don't have room for improvement, how are you going to ever measure those who are above level? Because taught isn't caught yet. Right? Now, and students will catch on, light bulbs go on at different points in time. So you always want to have something that they can reach for and try. Set out the little extra challenge. And then lastly, make sure that your instructional levels really match those targeted levels. And instruction isn't about what grammar is in this particular unit or this particular year. It's really focusing on what they can do that you can measure. Those functional, what we call can-do pieces. So another challenge to creating a Seal of Biliteracy program that's successful is to recognize that you're going to have different pathways. All students are not created equal. I taught Spanish, both the Spanish AP language and culture course and the Spanish literature course. And I had students in there because they had passed maybe at that D the year prior and just liked language or they just liked their friends. They were even still taking the course, but maybe they were still novice high or intermediate low. And I had students who were in the advanced range. So you have that mixed group of students. So what are you going to do? Well, first of all, you want to recognize, do you have heritage language learners? They're going to have some challenges, but they also have an awful lot of strengths. And their pathway may be different. Their pathway, you may be able to get them much higher than intermediate mid because they have those skills ahead of that time, in which case maybe that's a place for a global seal complement. What if you have a middle school program? Wouldn't it be incredibly exciting to recognize those middle school students and then give the a pathway award and then continue to set them up to continue language learning at the high school level? Or have you identified students in your community that may have language skills, but also they're not an English language learner, they have acquired this language from home, maybe from a community-based Saturday school program, maybe because they're really good with Duolingo. Who knows, right? A lot of students, I want to learn Korean because I like K-pop, right? So we have on incredible digital tools now to take language learning independently and find those students so they can also be included and recognized. And that's really important. So examine your students and who are they, and maybe consider that they're going to have alternate sort of pathways. And so learners need to know what that level is, not just where they're headed, but also what the current level they are is. And this is a great slide to examine later, because there's lots of good ideas on here about what they should be doing at each level. Not in a grammar way, but in a functional way. Right? So that's incredibly important. And if this is a topic that interests you, find me, because I love this topic. My favorite thing is watching students level up, and how do we get them to do that? And so I heard, once again, their sports were popular, especially this one. So I thought it would be important to share a story of one of my students, who was our star quarterback at the high school where I was teaching. And amazing, got Fulbright scholarship, but he also got a Seal of Biliteracy. So I'm really impressed with his Spanish skills. But he didn't start as the quarterback, on the varsity team his senior year. It took a while because a skill, just like sports, and this might be a great analogy for your students, is something that takes time. And so these are pictures of when he was 2 years old. His mom gave me these pictures. Then when he was, in grade school and in sort of the club programs on Saturdays. And just to let students know that it takes a while to get there. And if you've got some sports heroes, they're going to recognize that intrinsically. They're going to understand that concept. That also, it's all important. That anything worth doing well, you can start doing it poorly at first. It's not an all or nothing. Language acquisition takes time. Or, as you might want to try this little line, it takes practice to go pro. Because maybe that's where your students are hoping to go. So what is the Global Seal doing to sort of strengthen these pathways? Well, one of the things that we're doing, we are announcing, we've just actually already announced it this fall, we have Pathway Ribbon Awards. And so if you want to recognize students at those incremental spaces, Maybe they've tested and they're not quite there yet, but you want to recognize where they are and keep them encouraged, because if you let them know they're doing something well, they continue to do it, you can. We also have created, it doesn't show too well under the lights here, but a free downloadable sort of language passport where students can take some autonomy and start tracking their own progress in terms of where they are toward reaching your state or a global seal of biliteracy. So, what's another challenge? Testing. There are a lot. You're going to see a list of approved tests for your Alabama State Seal. And so you select that test, but it's not just give them the test one day. Okay? They need to be prepared for that. If you're teaching in a proficiency way, that test is going to be a lot easier, because it is not a test of grammar. There's no fill in the blanks with the right verb form or pick the right vocabulary word. It's what can they do out of their own resources. It's an open prompt that they're going to need to respond to if it's a listening, writing, or a speaking prompt. So here we have some students, actually these are students testing for Polish from New Jersey. And yeah, it's a real testing situation. And that's important for our universities to know that the Seal of Biliteracy is a rigorous program. But to get the students there, they kind of have to know what it looks like. So this is something I used in my own classroom to just show, and this is a poster, bulletin board. I'm out of time, I've been out too long. And just kind of show where our state seal was. And I used these sort of images for novice low, novice mid, and novice high, based on the support structures that were needed. Those of you who are teaching level 1, do I have some level 1 teachers? You are all about the baby, right? Come on, you can do it. Oh my goodness, you said muy bien perfectly. That was so cool, right? But when you get to those level 2s and you start picking on their grammar, do you know they still need that encouragement? They don't need picking, right? Because they're doing really well for where they are. So don't lose that excitement. That's just my little soapbox message on the off there. And then at the intermediate, again, they're doing that intermediate. They're not at intermediate mid where they're functionally using the language. It won't be pretty. It's not perfect, but they can get by. They can survive. But that low where they still kind of need a little wobbly, they're training those yet. And then that we say intermediate high is that like the learner's permit. They're not quite advanced, but they think they are, right? And they're ready to go. A really cool piece about testing is the high value you get back from the score reports, especially if you do what we call benchmark testing. In other words, you do it earlier, so it's not a pass-fail. Like, I don't want to get to my senior year and take the test in April or May and find out that I missed it in one category. That's devastating to a student, especially when they've done the work in the other, and they're going to have strengths and weaknesses. And you're going to see on a 4-skill report that it would be an anomaly if a student was exactly the same level in every skill, because we have strengths and weaknesses. John Hattie's done a lot of research on visual learning and how important it is to see what it is you do. And that's exactly what the pathway to proficiency is. It's visible learning. I can see where I am. I can see I have strengths and weaknesses, so I know where to focus my study time. Not on my strength, but on where I'm trying to improve. A 4-skill report is visual. It gives imagery, which works for a lot of students, but it also provides positive feedback. So in the first column, we have 2 examples here, an Apple test as well as a Stamp 4S test. Both of them in that first column say, this is what you did to get that score. That is important information. Oh, you use transitions, or you had a lot of vocabulary, or whatever it is they use. And then the second column provides them with some metacognitive strategies of what it is you need to do to level up. So you did this. Here's what you need to add to get to the next level. This is important information not only for the student, but for you as a teacher when you look at a group report and begin to look at the trends in your own classrooms. In my school district, we found that our listening scores were low. Teachers were listening to teachers. We were teaching primarily 90% of the target language, following actual guidelines, but they only heard their teacher. They weren't hearing a lot of other voices. And so that's really important. So, preparing students to test. Yes, they have to take the test. And they're terrified because they want to succeed. So again, benchmark testing makes a little less a riskier test earlier on, and they might qualify. And then they might have the incentive to level up to the next level. We saw with a school district in Albuquerque, 11% of the students leveled up in from one year to the next. Now, they might have been somewhere in the middle, but it was really exciting to see. And so one of the things we created in Global Seal is a free self-assessment reflection tool. It's all in English, so it works with all languages, and it's just using some emoji icons to say, no, I can't do that. I can do that a little, or I can do it really well. And it's adaptive. And there's one for all 4 skills, and there's one for all 3 communicative modes: interpersonal, presentational, and interpretive. And so when we see that, based on those can-do statements, the students can get a little score report at the end of the little self-assessment for everyone they do. There's 6 altogether. They take about 5 minutes. The students say, oh, I didn't know I was there. So if you need something to encourage them, or at the beginning of the year you want to get an idea of where your students are, you can use this. And at the end, the students have an opportunity to share their score report, so they might share it with you, the teacher. Students do differ, and there are strengths. And so I think I wanted to share this with you because these are our 2021 across the board. We certify students. We've had some as young as 6th grade. That's unusual, but we have a few. All the way through adults. I think our oldest now is 79. So, but notice that we have 6% of our middle schoolers at advanced low or above. Now, these are students in heritage language programs, dual language programs, immersion, that kind of thing, heritage speakers. But at the high school level, that jumps to 13%. So this is at that intermediate mid space. Your students can get there, and they may go higher. So this is what I want to encourage you with. We see the higher ed, it changes, but not only marginally. And then, of course, in the adults that are using language in the workspace, we see a big difference. And so I think one of the things we want to think about is what can they do. Now, this is an overall picture over thousands of Global Seals that we did last year. This is one class, and this is a class of heritage students. And I think this is important as an that your students are not all B's or A's or C's. They are A, B's, and C's wrapped up into one that you've averaged with different skill needs. And so if we look at this, these are heritage students. So this is a challenge. In listening, almost 11 out of the 19 students were in the advanced range. In speaking, 7 were in the advanced range, but 11 were in that sort of intermediate space. But look what happened when we shifted to the skills that were in terms of literacy, the reading and writing. It went down quite a bit. In fact, those 11, now there's only 1 in the advanced range in writing. This is typical in any classroom if you begin to look at your students as individuals with individual skills. But that's going to really help you in terms of your planning and instruction. And so I mentioned the challenge with these heritage learners. There were only 7 states in the last State Seal of Biliteracy report that represented more than 25 languages. So this is always my challenge, to get it to include diversity, to look for the students with other languages so they can also be represented, recognize that their identity is affirmed. I think Chicago Public Schools is one of the best examples of how to do that because they offer benchmarking awards for their English language learners at 5th grade, 8th grade on their English side and provide support services for the parents to work on their home language. And then as seniors, they're getting their State Seals of Biliteracy, which is important because in my state of Illinois, that's 8 hours of college credit. And so the last challenge and solution here is to be sure that you celebrate what you want to duplicate. If you don't make it big, if you don't make it huge, if you don't make them have that feel-good, I accomplished something moment, you're missing out. This is one of the challenges for schools that use the advanced placement test, and that's because it's usually given the senior year, test is taken in May, scores come back in July, the students have already graduated. You lose the opportunity for applause. And you lose the opportunity for all the other students to see what they got. So that's another rationale why you might want to partner a State Seal program with another test that you could potentially provide a Global Seal earlier, or at least give them a benchmark because we don't want them taking that advanced placement test and missing in one of the categories. And so thinking about the longer pathways, these are the benefits to students. They can distinguish themselves, potential for early admission because they've got something to stand out, scholarships, and certainly we see advanced placement for most of these students. They are aware of that career connection we saw earlier. Pay differentials we talked about. That's a piece that they are caring about. College credit. There are 5 states that provide automatic college credit for their state SIL recipients. That's not the case here yet in Alabama, but I would suggest you follow Missouri's example. In Missouri, they've taken individual universities post on the state's the Seal website a letter that says, if you have a Seal of Biliteracy, this is what we will give your students. And that's important because you want to attract these students with these great language skills to your programs. It's about adding value. Again, we talked about recognition, college credit, graduation honors. If they get special cords or ribbons or medals, that's important. They stand out. Other parents are like, in our graduate program, there was like a little symbol, Seal of Biliteracy, next to their name. Social media shout-outs. In our school, we really wanted to promote it, so we did it with our individual language honor societies. If you were, as part of your honor society application, there was a little checkbox that said, "I'm pursuing the Seal of Biliteracy." If you really want to be an honor student in that language, you should be doing that. And that really helped, again, make for those earlier students, make the pathway visible and make it a part of your classroom, like I use my bulletin board. Add the Global Seal of Biliteracy if you want something. So I'm just going to close with just a couple of slides about that program. The Global Seal has 3 levels of certification: intermediate mid, advanced low, and advanced high. And we use workplace terms. We call it functional fluency, working fluency, and professional fluency. No age limits. That means every one of you in here qualifies to earn a Global Seal of Biliteracy. We encourage our students to level up, start in middle school with one, maybe then add it in high school, and then add another one after a study abroad program at the university level. And we certify in over 130 different languages. So we're really proud of that. We have been issued in all 50 states, the District of Columbia, and now I think it's actually 12 countries. Something's maybe missing there. So we're seeing incredible growth and excitement. The Global Seal fits under license and certifications on LinkedIn. So some students are using that, similar to like a Common App, where they're sort of putting out their language skills. That's really important for our university students. And we have a digital sharing tool where they can share their certificate, share a description of what that means in terms of workplace tasks, and share their language journey. And so what we want to think about closing is, what can you do as a teacher? Well, I've given you lots of ideas to how to share and get people excited to implement your program, but I also want to challenge you to take a test yourself. If you don't know what's expected of your students, it'll be hard to prepare them. And it could be an aha for you. If you think about it, when was the last time you wrote academically in the language you teach? Doing that at the top of a paper doesn't count as academic essay writing. So you might need a refresher, and it's a good aha for you. And a lot of our teachers are telling us that. We just had one of our, Paula Moore here, who did a program on how to recognize your teachers with a Seal of Biliteracy. And she said it's the best PD she offers for her teachers. And so it's a great recognition tool, something they can add to a signature, and they're leading by example. So with that, I'm closing, and I do want to just encourage you to seek me out during the day. If anything here started a little seed of thought and you'd like to continue that, and also know that we'll be sharing these slides with Sherry so you have them for your reference. So thank you very much.
I want to thank Linda. Wow, she's given us a lot to unpack. I mean, there are a lot of ways to get into the SEAL movement. She gives a great overview. As the day develops, you will get a sense of what does this look like in Alabama. So we're going to get there as the day develops. So never fear, you have this sort of broad national, international, state-by-state view so that you can kind of understand how this is going to work on the ground in Alabama. Before we get there, however, the next panel, and I want to invite our panelists to come on up to the stage, and our moderator while I'm introducing our next act, so to speak, that we will be getting in a